Have you ever met someone, for just a moment, and felt like your soul recognized them? What if the people who enter your life, every friend, every stranger, every heartbreak, aren't accidents at all, but part of a map? What if that argument you can't forget, the love you had to let go, the silence between you and someone you once trusted, was all pointing to something deeper? This is the story of a man who walked away from everything to find peace, and instead found himself. A story of mirrors, shadows, and the quiet lanterns we carry into the lives of others, told through the eyes of a gentle monk, in a hidden monastery where each breath reveals a new truth. This is not just a story, it is your reflection. Stay with us, and by the end, you may discover that the person you're searching for is already within you. Part 1. The Garden of Arrival. Every encounter has a seed. They say the most important meetings in life don't happen in boardrooms or crowded cities. They happen in silence, beside rivers, under trees, between strangers whose eyes hold a memory you can't quite place. In the far highlands of a mist-covered valley, where the early morning light folds gently across pine-covered hills, there stands a small temple carved from time itself. The stone steps leading to its entrance are worn smooth by centuries of quiet footsteps. Wildflowers bloom freely along the paths. The wind carries the scent of cedar and old rain. And in this quiet corner of the world lives a monk, robed in soft gold, whose eyes reflect both the kindness of the earth and the vastness of the sky. He does not go by a grand title. Most who meet him never ask his name. They simply call him the monk. And to those who come searching, he offers not answers, but presence. This is where our story begins. One spring morning, just as the mists were lifting from the river that ran behind the monastery, a traveler arrived. His name was Daniel. He was not a pilgrim or a seeker of fame. He came because something inside him had begun to ache. A kind of quiet despair that no doctor could diagnose and no distraction could numb. He stood at the gates of the temple, unsure of what to say, when the monk appeared from the garden. He was bent slightly from age, but moved like water, unhurried, graceful, present. His robe glowed like sunrise against the green backdrop of moss-covered stone. "You look tired," the monk said simply. Daniel lowered his eyes. "I don't know what I'm looking for," he admitted. The monk looked past him toward the river. "Then you've come to the right place," he said. "The garden does not ask the seed to know what it will become." They walked together in silence, past wind chimes swaying gently in the breeze, past old trees whose roots held the ground like memory. The days that followed were slow, purposefully so. Daniel joined the daily rhythms of the temple, sweeping the garden paths, listening to the rustling bamboo, sitting with the monk beneath the plum trees. There was no rush, no sermons, only the gentle unfolding of space between breath and thought. One afternoon, as they walked near a stone bridge spanning the river, Daniel broke the silence. "Lately, people from my past keep returning to my mind," he said. "Friends I've lost, people I barely knew, even someone who hurt me. Why now?" The monk paused. A leaf floated down between them, landing softly on the water. "Because every person you've met," he said, "has left something within you. Seeds, scattered across the soil of your life. Some you noticed, some you didn't, but all of them took root." Daniel sat on a smooth rock beside the stream. The water shimmered with dappled sunlight. He remembered the voice of a girl from college who once told him, "Don't forget who you are." He remembered a man on a subway who had shared a single sentence that haunted him for years. "I thought some people were just passing moments," he whispered. "There are no passing moments," said the monk, "only seeds waiting for the right season." That evening, as the sky blushed pink and the wind whispered through the pine needles, the monk lit a small lantern by the garden's edge. He handed Daniel a blank scroll and a brush. "Write their names," he said, "not just the ones you loved. All of them, every person who stirred something inside you. They came for a reason." Daniel wrote into the night. Some names he wrote with gratitude, some with sorrow. Some made his hands tremble. And when he was finished, the monk took the scroll, bowed deeply, and placed it beneath a plum tree in full bloom. Your garden remembers, he said. Now, so do you. In the days that followed, Daniel began to see his life differently, not as a series of disconnected events, but as a landscape shaped by invisible hands. He saw his betrayals as lessons, his heartbreaks as awakenings, his briefest encounters as sparks. You are not only soil, the monk told him one morning as they watched cranes rise from the river. You are also a gardener. You plant with every word you speak, every silence you hold. Be mindful of what you leave behind in the hearts of others. On the morning of his departure, mist returned to the valley. The monk stood beside him at the gate. I still don't know what my purpose is, Daniel said. The monk placed a hand gently on his shoulder. Then live as if every moment matters, he said, because it does. Daniel bowed deeply. The monk bowed in return. No more words were needed. So now, dear listener, I ask you, who are the seeds in your garden? Who whispered something that stayed in your heart long after their voice was gone? Who appeared like a storm and changed your soil forever? And most of all, what kind of seeds are you planting in the lives of others? Perhaps there are no accidents. Perhaps the ones we've met, briefly or deeply, are part of a much older design. Perhaps, like Daniel, you are just beginning to remember the garden you've been growing all along. If this story has moved something within you, please support our channel Buddhism in every moment by subscribing. Your presence here is no coincidence. When you are ready, I invite you to walk with us further into the next chapter of this journey. Part 2. The Path of Mirrors. People reflect our inner lessons. A dense morning fog clung to the river that curled through the valley below the temple. The world was hushed, as if all of nature had paused to listen to its own stillness. The air smelled faintly of pine and distant rain, and a pale sun strained to break through the soft gray veil above. Daniel stood barefoot at the edge of the monastery's garden pond, watching his own reflection ripple on the water's surface. He had woken early, long before the bell, disturbed not by sound, but by a vivid dream, a memory. Really, in it, he was arguing with someone from his past. The words stung as if freshly spoken. Though years had passed, when he awoke, the pain remained, not sharp, but aching, like an old bruise pressed from within. The monk approached quietly, as he often did, his presence as natural as wind in the trees. His golden robe shimmered in the pale morning light, catching drops of dew from the low-hanging leaves. You've seen something, the monk said, his voice like warm rain. Daniel nodded, not turning. Someone, from my past. I haven't thought about her in a long time. But suddenly she was here. Angry, accusing. I could feel every word. Was it a dream? The monk asked gently. I'm not sure, Daniel said. It felt real, like something unfinished found its way back to me. The monk knelt beside him. Together, they watched a single red maple leaf drift onto the surface of the water and circle slowly. Caught in a breeze neither of them could feel. We believe we bury these things, the monk said, but nothing buried in the heart stays still. It only waits. They sat in silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through bamboo. After a while, Daniel spoke again. She said I never saw her. That I only loved the version of her that didn't challenge me. And is that true? The monk asked. Daniel winced. Maybe. I didn't want to deal with her pain. It was too much, so I avoided it, tried to fix it. I made her feel small, like her feelings weren't valid. He drew a breath, the admission cutting deeper than he expected. And now I wonder, how many people have I done that to? How many of my relationships have been more about protecting myself than truly seeing the other person? The monk placed a hand on the stone beside him, as if grounding himself to the earth. In Zen, he said, we speak often of the mirror, not the one you look into each morning, but the mirrors hidden in other people, the ones that reflect parts of us we would rather not see. Daniel listened closely, his attention drawn in like a tide to the moon. Sometimes, the monk continued, we meet someone who makes us feel alive. We see light in their eyes, beauty in their presence, but in truth, we are seeing our own light, our forgotten softness, reflected through them. And sometimes we meet someone who angers us, who challenges us, who makes us feel small or afraid. We tell ourselves they are the problem, that they are toxic or cruel. But often, they are showing us the corners of our spirit that remain in shadow. Daniel looked back down at the water. His reflection had blurred, lost to ripples and drifting leaves. So how do I know what's real? He asked. How do I know if someone is truly hurtful? Or if they're just showing me something I haven't healed? The monk didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and motioned for Daniel to follow him. They walked through the garden path, beneath arching trees and stone lanterns covered in moss. The early light was beginning to pour through the clouds, casting long, golden beams between the trunks. Birds began to stir in the distance. The monk led Daniel to a grove of ancient cypress trees. At the center stood a weathered wooden post carved with old symbols. Around it, stones had been laid in a perfect circle. The air was still here, like inside a held breath. This is the mirror circle, the monk said. It is one of the oldest places in this valley. For generations, those seeking clarity have come here, not to find answers, but to sit with the reflections they have spent their lives avoiding. Daniel sat down slowly on one of the stones. The quiet felt heavier here, sacred somehow. The monk took his place across from him. His face was calm, but focused. I will ask you something, he said. Answer only with your breath. No words. Daniel nodded. When you think of this woman, the one from your past, what do you feel in your body? Daniel closed his eyes. Tightness in my chest. The monk nodded. That is where her words landed. A pause. When you remember her sadness, what do you feel in your own sadness? Daniel's breath caught. Shame and guilt. Not for what you did, the monk said, but for what you couldn't offer. Daniel opened his eyes. The monk's gaze was steady. Now, the monk said, imagine her standing before you again, not angry, not hurt, just present, silent. What do you want to say? Daniel hesitated. Then, softly, I'm sorry I made your pain about me. I didn't see you, not really. And now, the monk said, imagine she says nothing, that she simply sees you, as you are now. Daniel felt something inside him give, like a knot untying in his ribs. Tears rose without warning, hot and sudden. He bowed his head. I've been carrying this for so long, he whispered. The monk waited. He did not speak, did not move, only watched. After a while, Daniel wiped his eyes and looked up. I thought healing was about forgetting, moving on, but now, it feels more like remembering, feeling again, letting the wound breathe. The monk smiled. That is the only kind of healing that stays. They remained in the mirror circle until the sun was high. Birds sang fully now, and the breeze had picked up, stirring petals from the nearby plum trees. As they walked back to the monastery, Daniel asked, will I always carry her with me? The monk stopped, turning to him with a kindness that seemed to glow. You will carry the lesson. She was the mirror, but the reflection, what you saw, was yours. And now, it belongs to you. Daniel nodded slowly. He looked back toward the grove, toward the circle hidden among trees and memory. Something had shifted inside him. Not a dramatic transformation, but a deep alignment, like stone settling into earth. Later that evening, he returned to the garden alone. The pond was still again. This time, when he saw his reflection, he didn't just see his face. He saw all the faces that had shaped him, teachers, lovers, enemies, friends, and he bowed, not to them, but to the parts of himself he had reclaimed through them. Above, the stars emerged one by one, each one a quiet witness to the unfolding journey of the soul. Part 3. The three travelers, guides, catalysts, and shadows. The rain had passed during the night. leaving the temple grounds bathed in a soft sheen of dew. Every stone, every leaf seemed to glisten under the pale morning sun. The bamboo chimes near the veranda sang gently in the breeze, their tones like distant memories returning home. It was a quiet day, the kind that moved not by hours, but by the rhythm of breath and shadow. Daniel stood beneath the old cherry tree at the edge of the temple gardens. The same tree under which he had sat during his first week in the monastery. He had changed, he could feel it. Something inside him had shifted. Quietly, but surely, he felt lighter, as if a piece of armor had been set down. The monk approached, his golden robe trailing softly over the stone path. He carried a small wooden box tied with a faded silk ribbon. In the light, the box looked ancient, the wood darkened by time and hands that had held it with reverence. "Come," the monk said. "Today I want to show you something." They walked together along the riverbank. The water flowed more swiftly now, fed by the rain, but it moved with grace, not violence. The monk stopped beneath a wide pine tree whose roots twisted like veins into the earth. "This tree," he said, "was planted 100 years ago by a traveler. He came here wounded, not in body, but in spirit. He stayed for a time, then left, but he left this behind." He looked at the tree with a kind of fondness, as one might regard an old friend. "People come into our lives for different reasons," the monk continued. "Some are meant to walk beside us for a long time. Others pass through briefly but leave behind something that changes us forever. And some come as shadows, not to harm, but to awaken us." Daniel watched the river move between stones. The words lingered. "Today," the monk said, "I want to tell you about the 3 travelers." He sat on the earth, motioning for Daniel to do the same. The monk placed the wooden box between them and opened it slowly, revealing 3 small carved figures, each worn, each distinct. "The first," the monk said, lifting the smallest figure, "is the guide." The figure was simple, an elderly man, eyes closed, hands open. The guide comes to walk with you. They may teach, or simply listen. They are the ones who stay, not always physically, but in spirit. Their presence is steady. Their gift is consistency. Daniel thought of his grandfather, of a teacher in school who once told him, "Your voice matters." Those moments had shaped him more than he'd realized. "The second," the monk said, holding a taller, sharper figure, "is the catalyst." This one was carved with motion. 1 foot forward, a cloak swept back by imagined wind. "The catalyst does not stay," he said. "They arrive suddenly, often during a time of crisis or change. They stir the waters, ignite something in you, passion, heartbreak, courage. Their role is to disrupt the old, to awaken something dormant." Daniel could feel his pulse quicken. He remembered someone, a woman named Lee. They had met during a turbulent time in his life. She had challenged him, broken him open. Their time together had been brief, but the lessons had been lifelong. "And the third," the monk said, lifting the final figure, "is the shadow." It was a darker carving, smooth and subtle, a face partially hidden. The shadow appears when you are ready to face what you've avoided. They may trigger pain, conflict, even anger, but they are not enemies. They are mirrors, reflections of the wounds you have yet to heal. Daniel stared at the figure. His chest tightened. He knew this archetype well. There were names, faces that surfaced immediately, people he had once cursed, avoided, hated even. But now he could see how those people had forced him to grow. He looked at the monk. "So we never meet anyone by accident." The monk smiled softly. "No, every traveler you meet on this path has been drawn by the same current that draws you. Some to offer you shelter, some to ignite your fire, some to show you where the darkness still lives inside." He replaced the figures in the box and tied the ribbon again, then placed it in Daniel's hands. "You may keep this," he said, "but do not use it to label people. Use it to understand yourself. Ask, what part of me did this person come to awaken? That is the true question." Daniel nodded, fingers tracing the box's old surface. He felt a deep sense of recognition, not just of others, but of himself. How often he had judged someone as wrong for him, simply because they made him uncomfortable. But now he saw, discomfort could be a sign of growth knocking. That evening, as lanterns were lit along the temple corridors, Daniel sat alone and thought of the 3 travelers in his life. He began to write their names, not in judgment, but in gratitude. The guide, the catalyst, the shadow, all of them had shaped the man he was becoming. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and somewhere in the valley, a crane lifted from the riverbank, rising into the darkening sky. Part 4. Seasons of Connection, Knowing When to Let Go. A late summer stillness settled over the valley. The days had grown longer, yet softer. The winds that once carried the scent of new blossoms now whispered with the dryness of leaves turning toward gold. Change was in the air, subtle, but certain. Daniel stood beneath a ginkgo tree at the temple's eastern gate. Its leaves, once vivid green, had begun their quiet transformation into a soft, glowing yellow. A few had already surrendered to the season, scattered like fragile prayers along the stone path. He watched one twist in the air as it fell, turning gently until it landed without sound. The monk approached from the garden, hands behind his back, his robe moving like sunlight across still water. He stopped beside Daniel and followed his gaze. "It's hard to watch things fall," Daniel said. "It's also the only way new life makes space to grow," the monk replied. They stood in silence for a long moment. Daniel had felt this shift coming, not just in the weather, but within himself. Old feelings rising again, old relationships, too, lingering like forgotten letters beneath a stack of newer ones. There was a quiet ache that accompanied them, not pain, exactly, but a kind of spiritual restlessness, a knowing that something once cherished no longer fit the shape of his life. "Do we always have to let go of people?" he finally asked. "Isn't it possible to keep everyone we've loved close to us?" The monk smiled gently, as one who had asked the same question many times. "Letting go," he said, "is not the same as losing. And love that is true doesn't always require proximity. It simply asks for presence, whether near or far." He motioned for Daniel to walk with him toward the river. The sun hung low, and the path was dappled with shifting light and shadow. As they reached the bank, Daniel noticed a small wooden boat tied to a post. It bobbed slightly with the rhythm of the current. "I knew a woman once," the monk began, his voice wrapped in memory. "She was kind, fierce, brilliant. We walked many years side by side. We shared the same rhythm. But over time, that rhythm changed. She began to hear a different drumbeat in her heart. At first, I resisted. I tried to call her back, but I was not her shore." He looked out across the water, his eyes soft. "I had to learn that the most compassionate act is not always holding on. It's knowing when to loosen the hand with love." Daniel felt those words settle deep in his chest. He had loved before. He had held on longer than he should have, believing that effort and devotion could preserve a connection that had already begun to dissolve. He thought love meant permanence. He had not yet known that love, too, has seasons. "What if they need us?" Daniel asked. "What if they're not ready to leave?" The monk looked at him, his gaze both kind and steady. "Then you love them by trusting their path, even when it does not include you. Not every departure is a failure. Sometimes, it is a fulfillment." They sat near the boat, the river murmuring its endless hymn beside them. Daniel thought of a friend who had once been everything. They had grown together, laughed through nights that stretched toward dawn. But recently, their connection had become strained. No argument, no betrayal, just distance, a sense that they were no longer meeting in the same inner world. He had been carrying guilt about that, blame, confusion. But now, sitting here, something inside him softened. "How'd I say goodbye?" he asked. "Without feeling like I'm abandoning them?" "You don't say goodbye to the person," the monk said. "You say goodbye to the role they played in your life. That chapter ends. But their presence, what they awakened in you, remains. He reached into the folds of his robe and took out a small scroll. Unrolling it revealed an ink painting of a tree shedding its leaves, standing alone on a hillside beneath a wide sky. Below it, a single line in calligraphy. To let go is to honor what was. Daniel stared at the image. It didn't make him sad. It made him feel clear, like the part of him that had resisted change finally understood that loss is not the end of love. Sometimes, it's how love matures. That evening, under the golden light of lanterns, he wrote a letter, not to send, but to release. It was addressed to the friend he no longer saw, to the version of himself that had once needed that friendship to feel whole. He wrote with tenderness, not with bitterness, and when he was done, he folded the paper and burned it at the temple's altar. The flame flickered, the smoke rose slowly, and he felt free. Later, the monk joined him on the veranda. Neither spoke, they simply watched the wind move through the trees, carrying the old leaves to places unknown. Not every connection is meant to last forever. Some arrive only to teach us what we are ready to learn. Others stay longer, their presence woven deeply into the fabric of our lives. And a few, a sacred few, must be released, so that both souls can continue to grow in the direction their spirit calls. Daniel knew now. Letting go is not turning away. It is turning toward what is true. And with that truth, he stepped deeper into the unfolding path ahead. Part 5. The fire within. Love without attachment. The monsoon winds had passed, leaving the valley washed and reborn. Everything shone in sharper color. The moss on the rocks, the curve of bamboo leaves, even the clouds floating lazily across a pale blue sky. The monastery felt hushed, not with silence, but with serenity, like a breath held in peace. Daniel sat beside the temple bell, its great bronze body warmed by the afternoon sun. In his hands was a letter, worn from being folded and reopened too many times. It was written by someone he had once loved deeply, a love that had not ended in anger, but in stillness, a love that had slipped away not because of wrongdoing, but because its form could no longer contain the truth growing inside them both. He read the letter again. The words were soft, filled with care, but unmistakably final. You don't belong to me, and I don't belong to you, and that is why I will always love you. The monk joined him a few minutes later, walking with the steady grace of one who has made peace with time. He looked at Daniel's face, the quiet storm behind his eyes, and said nothing. He simply sat beside him and let the wind speak first. Daniel finally broke the silence. How can love like that still hurt? The monk looked out across the valley. Because most of us are taught that to love means to hold, to keep. But true love is not possession. It is presence. It is not about binding another to you. It is about seeing them fully and letting them be free. Daniel exhaled, his hands tightening slightly around the paper. I tried to hold on, not by force, but by hoping she would come back. That maybe love could bend time, or change the direction of two lives. And yet, the monk said gently, you are here, and so is she. Just not in the same story anymore. They rose and began walking through the garden path that circled the main hall. Around them, bees hovered lazily over blooming camellias, and a small breeze teased the wind chimes into their delicate ringing. The monk continued, when we speak of attachment in Buddhist teaching, we do not mean love is wrong. Love is sacred, but when love becomes entangled with expectation, when we demand love to look a certain way, stay a certain length, feel a certain depth, we begin to suffer. Not because love failed, but because our idea of love was rigid. Daniel nodded slowly. So I wasn't grieving the love itself. I was grieving the version of it I didn't get to keep. Yes, the monk said, that version was yours, but she was not. They reached the koi pond. The water was calm, save for the slow circling of orange and white fins beneath the surface. The monk pointed toward the fish. They do not cling to the water, yet the water carries them always. Daniel smiled, almost despite himself. You always have a metaphor. The monk chuckled softly. No, the world does. I only listen. They sat again, this time near the edge of the pond, where lotus flowers floated with gentle dignity. The monk plucked a petal from a fallen bloom and turned it slowly between his fingers. There is a story, he said, of a man who loved a bird with wings like gold. He built a cage so fine it caught the sun. He placed fruit and sweet water inside, and the bird sang every morning. But one day, the bird grew silent, not sick, not angry, just silent. When the man asked why, the bird said, "Because my song belongs to the sky." And the man opened the cage. Daniel closed his eyes and let the story wash over him. I didn't realize how much of my love was rooted in fear. He whispered, fear of losing her, fear of being alone, fear of not being chosen again. The monk rested a hand on the stone between them. That fear is not shameful, he said. It is human, but when we recognize it, we are no longer controlled by it. We can then choose to love from a deeper place, a freer place. Daniel turned the letter over in his hands once more. For the first time, he felt something different rising, not grief, but a warm ache, a reverence, not for what could have been, but for what was. She helped me become who I am now, he said. She didn't stay, but her presence shaped me. It woke me up. The monk smiled. Then it was love. They sat until the shadows lengthened and the light softened into amber. When they stood, Daniel placed the letter beneath a stone at the garden's edge, a small offering to impermanence, to beauty that does not need to last to be real. As they walked back toward the temple halls, the monk spoke once more. Love without attachment does not mean love without depth. It means loving without the need to control. It means giving someone the sky, and trusting they will carry your song even if you cannot hear it anymore. And with those words, Daniel felt the last thread loosen, not broken, not torn, just released, like a leaf drifting down a stream. No resistance, no clinging, just the soft, endless motion of love in its purest form. It moved on, and so did he. Part 6. The lantern we carry, becoming that person for others. Autumn had arrived quietly, with mornings that breathed cold against the skin and evenings that wrapped the mountains in amber mist. The temple grounds had taken on a deeper stillness, the kind that comes when the world is preparing for rest, not death, but renewal. The ginkgo tree by the eastern gate had dropped most of its leaves. Now, the earth beneath it looked like a golden carpet. Daniel stood there with a rake in his hand. He moved slowly, almost rhythmically, clearing fallen leaves from the path, not because it needed to be perfect, but because he had come to love the quiet clarity of such simple labor. Every sweep was like an exhale. Behind him, the monk emerged from the shadows of the inner hall. His steps, as always, made no sound. He watched for a moment, then joined him. Daniel didn't look up right away. He was waiting for something, a word, a gesture, but the monk simply picked up a second rake and began to work beside him. After a long pause, Daniel finally said, "I don't want to leave." The monk stopped and leaned against his rake. "You are not leaving. You are continuing." Daniel looked at him, eyes searching. "But I'm afraid I won't carry this with me. That I'll forget. That the world will pull me back into the noise." The monk offered a soft smile. "The world is always noisy. But once you've found silence within yourself, it goes with you, like a lantern in the dark." Daniel lowered his eyes, the weight of the moment settling into his chest. "You've given me so much," he said, "but what if I can't give the same to others?" The monk turned, resting both hands on the top of the rake. "You already are," he said. "Every time you listen without needing to reply, every time you pause instead of react, every time you sit with someone's pain without needing to fix it, you are carrying the lantern." They walked together toward the temple's main gate, where the valleys stretched wide and endless below them. The village beyond was just beginning to stir, its rooftops catching the first hints of morning light. "There's a young boy in the village," the monk said quietly. His mother comes here sometimes to pray. The boy is angry, lost, but last time he came, he spoke of you. Daniel turned, surprised. Me? He said, the quiet man who helped me carry firewood. He looked at me like he wasn't afraid of my anger. Daniel's breath caught. He hadn't remembered the moment. It had seemed small. An afternoon spent helping a tired boy with too much weight on his shoulders. That is how the light moves, the monk said, not in grand gestures, but in presence, in patience, in choosing not to close your heart when it would be easier to retreat. They sat once more in the inner garden, where the first frost had touched the grass. The lanterns had not yet been lit, but the sun was beginning to climb. Many people go through life waiting for someone to save them, the monk said, to heal them, to offer wisdom, kindness, peace. But what if you are that person for someone else? What if your journey, the pain you survived, the clarity you've earned, is now someone else's map? Daniel felt a deep stillness rise in him. He thought of his past self, the man who had first climbed the temple steps, lost and hollow. He thought of the strangers who had unknowingly offered him light through gestures, words, even silence. And now, he realized, it was his turn. He reached into the sleeve of his robe and pulled out a folded piece of paper. On it were names, the names of those who had changed him. The guide, the catalyst, the shadow, the friend he let go, the woman he released in love, and, now, the monk. He placed the list on the altar and bowed deeply. Let me be that for someone, he whispered. The monk placed a hand on his shoulder. You already are. As the sun fully rose over the valley, casting long gold across the courtyard stones, Daniel stood and walked toward the path that would lead him down the mountain. He carried no bag, no tokens, only what had been placed in his heart, clarity, compassion, and the soft glow of something ancient and enduring. 7. Reflection and closing message. The journey of Daniel, a lantern for the soul. Daniel's journey began not with a dramatic crisis or thunderous awakening, but with a quiet ache, an ache so familiar to many of us in the modern world, a sense of misalignment, of being surrounded by people yet untouched by connection, of living a life that, on the surface, appeared successful but felt hollow at its core. He didn't come to the monastery with answers. He came with questions wrapped in silence. And in that silence, he met the monk. From the very first encounter, under that flowering tree where the monk greeted him without expectation, Daniel began walking a path not of belief, but of becoming. He came seeking peace and found reflection. In the garden of arrival, he learned that every person who enters our lives, even briefly, plants a seed. These seeds may blossom with joy or grow through struggle, but none are without purpose. Each relationship shapes us. Each encounter is a step in our evolution. Whether tender or painful, even loss is a teacher. He came seeking clarity and found mirrors. In the path of mirrors, Daniel discovered that others often reflect parts of ourselves that remain unhealed or unknown. The people who trigger us, challenge us, even those we judge, are not random figures. They are living invitations to deeper self-awareness. Painful relationships are not always wrong. They are often revelatory. He came seeking guidance and found archetypes. Through the three travelers, Daniel learned that every significant relationship can be understood through symbolic roles. The guide who teaches with patience, the catalyst who shakes us awake, and the shadow who reveals our wounds. These archetypes helped Daniel reframe his past and let go of the weight of blame. He came seeking freedom and found release. In the seasons of connection, he came to understand that not all connections are meant to last. People come into our lives for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. Letting go isn't failure, it is grace. And to release someone with love is a powerful act of maturity and compassion. He came seeking love and found presence. In the fire within, Daniel discovered the heart of Buddhist love, not attachment, not control, but presence. True love is not about holding on to someone. It's about seeing them fully and giving them the freedom to be who they are. Even if it means letting go. Love without attachment is not a weaker love, it is the deepest form of love. Because it does not demand anything in return. He came seeking purpose and became the light. Finally, in the lantern we carry, Daniel understood that the wisdom he gathered was not his to keep. It was his to share. In the quiet ways we show up for others, in patience, in stillness, in compassion, we become for others what others were for us. The journey inward becomes the gift we offer outward. This is the arc of Daniel's journey. But in truth, it is not just Daniel's story. It is ours. Each of us has walked paths we didn't understand until we looked back. Each of us has loved and lost, clung and released, judged and forgiven. We've played every role, the seeker, the mirror, the shadow, the lantern, and we will again. The wisdom of this story is not only in its beauty, but in its application to modern life. In today's fast-paced, emotionally overstimulating world, we are often too distracted to reflect, too busy to pause, too afraid to feel. But this story reminds us, to pause is to return to yourself. To reflect is to see the truth behind the emotion. To love without needing is to liberate both yourself and others. And to let go is not to lose, but to create space, for peace, for clarity, for life. So how can you carry this story into your own life? Start small. Notice your emotional reactions. Who in your life reflects something difficult? What are they showing you about yourself? Honor your guides. Write down the names of those who shaped you, even if only briefly. What did they teach you? Practice mindful love. When you love someone, ask yourself, do I love them? Or do I love the role they play in my life? Let the answer deepen your relationship. Release with compassion. If someone's season has ended, let them go with grace. Carry the memory, not the weight. Be a lantern. You don't need to be a monk, a teacher, or a sage. Just be kind, be present, be real. That alone changes the world. Daniel's story ends at a beginning. The monk, ever silent, does not give him a grand farewell, because transformation is not loud. It is subtle, like a change in the wind, a deeper breath, a steadier heart. And now, dear listener, perhaps you are ready to